Hello, I'm Leif and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel called Devs and Dice. Today marks the first on this channel. I'm going to show you how I built this Dwarven fountain. Let's get to it. Okay, so I'm going to start by milling up some thin sheets of XPS foam, which I will use throughout the build. Now, onto that, I trace out a design that I want, and this design is very much sort of inspired by the mines of Moria and the Dwarven pillars that they find in Moria. And as you can probably see there in the background, I do have a plan that I did in Illustrator, mostly for myself. Tell me in the comments if you want it, then I can share it. That being said, there were some changes when I got to the building process. Here you can see I'm tracing out different sizes of these sort of pointy designs, and my plan here is to use this for the center pillar, so I'm gonna need essentially 12 of each size. And for some reason, I think I wanted to try out a new glue that I found that was supposedly good for foam, and that's what I used to glue these together. You'll see later in the process that I actually used hot glue. Here I am using some foam core, which I don't have any foam core without that paper, but thanks to Sean's excellent tutorial, I now know how to remove paper from foam core. Check out his video on this up in the corner. Now the design of the fountain, I wanted it to be octagon, but not sort of equal sides, so to speak. So I just made a design that I thought felt good. These bricks I have pre-made. Tell me in the comments if you want to know how I did these bricks. Here you can see the approximately 3 on each side, and then I had to figure out how to lay the bricks in these small sort of corners of the octagon. But that was quite easy by just cutting them into shape and then hot gluing them into place. As you can see, this is going quite fast. This isn't really a tutorial like I usually do, because there are so many steps. So if you have any questions in regards to specifics, then feel free to ask me in the comments. But it's fairly self-explanatory. I am using a rock, my so-called texture rock. I use that or sort of scrumpled up tin foil or aluminium foil to get sort of a nice stone texture. And whenever there's a gap, I actually just put in a small sliver. All of these things you might think that a man from IKEA land would not like, but actually that just brings more character to the piece. Once I had the shape in place, I started texturing these triangle thingamithings. And you can see there that pillar is approximately 1 × 1 inches in width. So I'm just hot gluing in a piece of these onto, I think this is the bottom. Now you might wonder, why am I doing that? I'm going to actually use the bottom for the top part. And here is another way that you can easily texture XPS foam using some aluminium foil. And here you can see I'm cutting off the excess and save those. I'm going to use those for the top. And here I'm simply just cutting a 45 or approximately 45-degree angle. My dwarves in my world aren't super accurate, I guess. And also this is supposed to be an old ruined fountain. Here I'm just sort of carving in some lines so that I know approximately where to cut. And then I just eyeball it and cut approximately 45 degrees. Some hot glue, and then squeeze that little sucker into place. Now the good thing about XPS foam is that it actually does sort of give in a little bit, so you can shape it quite a lot, I feel like. And here you can see the remnants or sort of the finished pillar. I just cut the bottom pieces into shape and then I glue them up top. Here I'm dry fitting the pillar. Now I needed to handle those corners. I knew I wanted to have sort of 4 Dwarven statue guards, and in order to do that I needed to create new triangular shapes. These I made sure that they were the exact same depth as the actual brick, which is 1 centimeter. And then I made some smaller ones just to sort of try it out, and then I started gluing them into place. And here I could have been more smart, but this is a telltale sign that not everything was super well planned, to be honest. I sort of went with my feeling and my gut a lot, and sort of just my instincts, you know, on what I wanted to do. Here is what I'm talking about. I'm actually cutting off the center pillar because, of course, this needs to fit sort of around the bricks. So, yeah, I mean, if I were to do it again, I would hopefully think about that beforehand. But here I'm just sort of trying to dry fit it, and I did have to cut a little sliver off on the inside because the bottom that I have of the actual fountain, of course, needs to have room. And once I had a snug fit, I simply glued it into place. And here you can see that I'm sort of eyeballing an approximate 3rd pointy thingamathing. And then I just cut it off, and once I have that, I can easily sort of create multiple. And this is sort of what it looked like in the end. Now I wanted a base for this because, like I perhaps mentioned, I wanted stone statues in front of each and one of those corners. So I just cut out some MDF from an old picture frame. So I just cut out an approximate sort of size, and then I had 1 × 1 inches sort of pillar on top of the pillar, just to sort of give the model that I'm going to have, or the mini that I'm going to have, a little bit more distance. Now I bought these pipes, or whatever you want to call them, and they were square, and I thought, you know what, that's perfect for dwarves. So I am just literally jamming them in where I can. Now XPS foam actually has sort of a grain, so in one direction it was super easy to just jam them in there, in another direction or in the opposite direction it wasn't, so then I had to just clean out the hole, and then once I was happy with the dry fit I just hot glued them into place. And it looks something like that, and I was quite happy with that actually. Now I wanted to test these models. I bought these years ago, and I bought, like, it was super cheap from the UK. I think it was like a pack of 20 dwarves, and they're injection mold mini, so they're not that nice, to be honest, but they will do the job as, you know, statues. So once we have that done, I of course come in with a coat of my Mod Podge and black paint mixture, made popular by Black Magic Craft. And it's a messy job, but oh god, does it protect that XPS foam. And meanwhile, while that was drying, I went in and I primed all of the dwarves in a black primer. Then I glued the actual fountain and the little steps that I created there also into place. And I've noticed this, so you don't have to comment this, but yes, it is a little bit off-center, but that's fine. I had already glued it and I didn't want to risk tearing off the bottom of the fountain. So I glued all of the soldiers into place, and as you might have noticed, their base I actually also cut in an octagon shape just to sort of make it fit a little bit more. And now I'm coming in with some of those scenics from Army Painter and just covering the entire base with this, essentially. And I'm gonna let that dry. And once that is dry, I'm gonna hit it with some black primer. And once that primer is dry, then I switched to the airbrush, and what I'm going to do here first is to do a zenithal prime, and I'm using actually inks here. And one thing I want to be very clear about is that I've never done this sort of elaborate terrain on video, and I have in the past done quite, you know, generic terrain, but I wanted to try something new. which is why I am zenithal priming this, and then I'm coming in with different inks. And the inks I'm coming in with is starting with sort of brown inks or sepia inks, and then I'm working myself sort of towards a more green in the center sort of a fountain. And once I had sort of that green-brown mixture in the fountain, then I'm starting to come in with more sort of moss green ink. And once I had the moss green ink on there, I came finally in with some sort of yellowish ink. Now this will of course tint it to be more bright green. And here it's also quite obvious that my inspirations was something from the dead in Lord of the Rings, and actually also a little bit Mordheim. There's been so much talk about Mordheim, so I started thinking about weird stones and you know, and also a little bit actually the graphics from Vermintide, which I have been playing lately, and I really like that game. So yeah, that's what I ended up with. Does it make sense? No. But I didn't want to create a generic fountain for, you know, a square in a Dwarven city. I wanted to create something that could look mystical or magical. Now the main statue, I airbrushed on some copper, and then I airbrushed on some gold from above to just create some difference. And once that had dried, I came in with Citadel's solution for patina. And once that had dried, I dry brushed on some gold color just to sort of make it pop a little bit more. And I think this is looking fairly good, but ultimately I'm going to have to sort of glue it into place and see what happens. Now I thought that this scene needed some highlights. I went back and forth on this, and I asked some good friends what I should do. Among them is Sean, and yeah, amongst ourselves we definitely sort of, yeah, it needs some dry brushing highlights. So I'm coming in with gray first, and then I'm hitting it with almost a stark white, but I'm being very careful with the stark white. And really what I'm after here is just to sort of highlight some shapes. Now that patina solution, I used that on the pipes as well, which I had also painted copper, or bronze, I guess. Now I let that dry, and this is what it sort of looked like. And I was fairly happy with this at this point, to be honest. I mean, not bad for a first sort of build on the channel, I thought. Now, for the water, I actually went with Woodland Scenics. I think it's called Realistic Water. It is not a resin. It is, I guess, an acrylic solution. The good part about that is it won't smell, and I've actually experienced very little warping or like, you know, it's shrinking and creating, you know, a mess. And that's what it looked like when it was done, actually. Now, this idea I sort of got from Squidmar, an awesome miniature painter from Sweden. I cut up some strips from a blister pack, and I sort of shaped them with some heat from a tea light, and then I glued them into the actual pipes. Now this is gonna essentially be like our, I guess, armature for the water. So as you can see, I did some smaller strips, some larger ones. This is the first time I'm doing this, so this was kind of scary, but hell, let's do it. Now, once the super glue had, you know, dried, I came in with some Vallejo water texture, I think this is called. I've used this in the past, and again, from Squidmar, he mentioned those small silicone sort of balls that you get in like shoes and bags and stuff like that. So I can't remember what it was I bought, but it sort of rang a bell in my head, so I saved those. And I'm literally just using a damp brush and sort of placing them into this this paste from Vallejo, and the paste will actually act like a glue. Now at this point it's quite scary because it looks super, you know, opaque and white, and it will never look good. But actually it looks somewhat decent. And here I'm coming in with some gloss Mod Podge just to sort of really work on primarily the surface of the water. There's 4, you know, faucets spewing out water, so there should be some activity on the surface of water. And then, just to sort of make sure that those balls won't go anywhere, I just hit it with another coat of Mordheim on top of the water spouts. Now, I thought that the main dwarf statue and the actual fountain didn't really mesh completely, so I went in with some washes just to grime that up and make it all look like it was part of the same scene. So at this point, I think it's time to have a look at the final results. Alright, good folks, that was really the first terrain build on this channel. I myself am very happy with the result, and I'm going to be mixing this up with miniature painting and terrain crafting wherever I feel like. Now I think I'm going to use this for D&D, but also Mordheim or potentially Warcry. So what do you think about the video and the result? Do me a solid one and please tell me in the comment section down below. And if you like these videos, then please consider subscribing, liking, or sharing this with your friends. All of these things help spread the word, which directly helps the channel. With this, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I want to wish you an awesome day. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video.